Story 1. A 29-year-old woman moved into a new apartment about a year ago, and I have a roommate around 55 years old who's been a major thorn in my side since day one. I honestly don't know what his problem is. Some people suspect he behaves this way because he likes me romantically. That idea makes me extremely uncomfortable. I don't usually have an issue with age differences in relationships, but a gap of over 20 years, that's far too much for me. Personally, I think it's because he's a controlling and unpleasant individual. I have plenty of examples that show just how mean and controlling he is. For now, I'll refer to him as Control Freak, or CF for short. If anyone is interested in hearing more stories, I'd be happy to share. But for now, I'll start with a smaller incident just to give you a glimpse of what living with him is like. This happened shortly after I had moved in. I did my grocery shopping at Albertsons. That store is the closest grocery store to my apartment, and I genuinely enjoy shopping there. In fact, I still do. They often have really great deals. One day, after I got home carrying several bags of groceries in my arms, CF noticed and asked me where I got them. I told him I bought them at Albertsons. He immediately got irritated and told me I should get my groceries through a delivery service that he uses instead. To this day, I honestly have no idea why he cared so much. He made it sound like it was just a suggestion. I told him I'd keep it in mind and went on with my day. I'm the kind of person who enjoys physically going to stores, walking around, picking out my own items, and trying to save money. I find the whole process convenient in its own way. Well, about a week later, I went grocery shopping again and came home with more bags. CF was there again and asked me how I got them. I told him I went to the store, just like before. He was quiet for a moment before he suddenly demanded that I give him my phone and debit card. He said he was going to sign me up for the delivery service he uses whether I wanted it or not. He only backed off after I told him my card didn't have enough money on it for the delivery service at that moment. He rolled his eyes and, as he walked back to his room, said, "You'd have enough money if you didn't spend it all at Albertsons." I quietly put away my groceries and went to my room. I spent the next few hours playing Mortal Kombat 11. I still can't figure out why he even cared so much about where I did my shopping. That's just one of many stories I have about living with him. If anyone's interested in hearing more, just let me know. Take care and have a lovely day. Story 2. Okay, so one of my biggest pet peeves when I worked in retail was my manager's insistence that I had to check up on the customers like every 5 minutes. The store I worked in was small enough that you could see everyone and what they were doing from the register. It was especially annoying when I had things to do behind the register. So, during this particular instance, which happened several years ago, I was in the store, and it was very slow. No one was in there at that moment. But inventory had arrived, so I had something to work on. Someone walked in, and I greeted them with, "Hey, my name is Sam. Let me know if you need anything," and listed some sales. The customer said okay and went about browsing. My manager came out from the back, probably not even 10 minutes later, walked over to me, and asked if I had helped the one person in the store. I told him I had greeted the customer and let him know to come get me if he needed anything. That didn't satisfy my manager, so I was forced to walk up to the guy and ask again. Keep in mind, not even 10 minutes had passed if he needed help. He said no, he was just looking around and seeing what was on sale. I left him alone, and he continued to wander about the store. Only roughly 5 minutes went by before my manager himself walked up to the guy and asked if he needed help. The customer was clearly annoyed now, but politely told my manager he was fine on his own. My manager came over to the register and stood next to me. Just a little over 5 minutes went by, and he told me to go again and ask the guy if he needed help. I walked over to him, and I could clearly tell from his face that he was extremely annoyed. So, I said quietly enough that my manager couldn't hear, "Hey, I'm sorry. I know you don't need help, but he's making me ask." The guy was still annoyed, but there was a look of understanding now. Then he said loudly enough for my manager to hear, "Thanks, I'm fine. I don't need help." If I do, I can find you. I'm not a child who needs to be walked around the store." I smiled and went back to the register, where my manager was standing with this expression I can't even describe. But finally, he went to the back, and for the rest of the day, he didn't bother me about checking in on customers. Cut to present day. Now, I'm a customer wandering the mall. I went into a clothing store. There were about 4 people working there. I was greeted and proceeded to wander the store because I was just browsing. I was barely in the store for 10 minutes, and every single worker there had come up to me and asked if I needed help. After 2 of them had come up a second time, I finally said, "You know what? I'm not okay. Could you get your manager, please?" The girl I asked looked confused but went and got a manager. The manager came out with that standard overly strained customer service smile and asked me what was wrong. I told her that I was annoyed by the fact that I was basically being followed around the store. I explained that I didn't need to be asked 20 times if I needed help. If I did, I could find someone. I was just browsing, and all this pestering was making the experience much less enjoyable. I added that I no longer wanted to shop there. I said, "I understand that this is a policy your company makes your employees follow, but I'm letting you know right now it's a very poor policy. I'm going to leave now, and I want you to know it's because of that." Her smile dimmed noticeably, and it was clear from her face that she was trying to process a proper sentence to respond with. Meanwhile, I noticed slightly off to my left 2 employees watching us, both smirking and smiling, one doing their best to hold in laughter, and the other quickly texting on their phone. I assumed it was to some kind of sales associate group chat or a friend. Before the manager could finish her apology, I just politely told her I was leaving again and exited the store. Also, I know some stores do this to prevent theft, but there's a big difference between keeping an eye on things and hovering over your customers. You don't need to hound people who are just trying to shop in peace. Story 3. No, this is not a made-up story. I just want to explain what I actually did. I've been doing this since September 2024 because I've been dealing with an ongoing noisy neighbor issue that continues to this day. My neighbors are constantly yelling, talking, and cheering loudly at midnight, which has rendered 2 of our rooms completely useless. They've ended up being used only as storage. I live on the 4th floor. So, one night I had a random, funny idea to blast loud African tribal or Maori chanting noises at maximum volume using my custom-built speakers, which are powered by a car stereo system. I positioned the speakers to face directly against my noisy neighbor's wall. It was incredibly loud, so much so that I couldn't even stand in the room anymore. The vibrations from the deep chanting vocals were intense, shaking everything inside and likely doing the same to the neighbor's wall. I kept this going for 3 hours straight. I want to explain just how loud it was because I noticed people walking by on the street were staring at my window in confusion, clearly wondering what in the world was going on up there. The windows of the storage room were wide open during this time. No, my speakers weren't near the window. They were just sitting on the floor, aimed at the wall shared with my neighbors. I went out to the balcony and was stunned by how loud the sound really was. It genuinely felt like an entire tribal ceremony was happening right there in the street, even though no one could see anything. The chanting could be heard from more than 200 feet away, and every person walking down our street looked up toward our window to see what was happening. It even got the attention of a nearby cafe. Some of the employees came out to the sidewalk and started looking up at our apartment window as well. Eventually, a bald man from the next apartment building stepped out onto his balcony and shouted at me, so I immediately stopped the sound. Maybe a powerful portable speaker like one from a well-known audio brand could have done an even more intense job, but I don't own one. And yes, I did it again a few days later. This time, my downstairs neighbors came knocking on my door. I quickly turned the volume down and didn't answer the door. I didn't really know how to respond at the time. I wasn't trying to be hostile. I was just beyond frustrated. The constant yelling and shouting during the night had pushed me to my limit. I had tried asking them politely in the past, but it didn't work. So, I figured that if they could be loud at night without any concern for others, Then maybe I could return the favor in a creative way, except during the day, not during sleeping hours. To be clear, I never did it late at night. I always did it during the day or early evening, just to make a point. I didn't want to disturb others unnecessarily, but I felt like my direct neighbors had it coming. I even considered trying other types of audio like bagpipes, marching bands, or medieval battle drums, but the tribal and Maori chants were just so effective and powerful. It sounded raw, deep, and thunderous, like an entire cultural festival was erupting in the living room. Of course, it was never meant to be a permanent solution. I just wanted them to understand how disruptive constant noise can be. I also hoped that maybe the shared experience of discomfort would motivate them to reflect on their own behavior. After the second incident, things did quiet down for a while. I don't know if it was because of the chanting or because they finally got the message. Either way, I haven't used the speakers since then, and the situation has been slightly better at least for now. I still keep the speakers ready just in case things get out of hand again, but I genuinely hope I don't have to use them. It's not something I enjoy doing. I just want to be able to sleep peacefully and use all the rooms in my home without having to resort to tribal chants or any other form of loud retaliation. Sometimes it feels like the only way to get through to certain people is by speaking their language metaphorically, of course, and in this case, that language was sheer, thunderous volume. Story 4. This happened a few days ago, and someone told me this is where I could share the story. The cast, me, cousin, entitled mom, and entitled kid. So a couple days ago my aunt and uncle were going out of town for 2 days and couldn't find a babysitter for my 8-year-old cousin. I, of course, offered to watch my little cousin because I love him and he is awesome. We mess around the house for a little bit, playing his Xbox and watching TV. After lunch, he tells me that he wants to go sledding. I called my aunt, and she said that was fine. Near our school, there is a huge pile of dirt, and when it builds up enough snow, it's a popular sledding spot around town. Everyone around is pretty nice in general, and it's a fun place. We slide down a few times and have lots of fun. Enter entitled mom and her terrible offspring. Entitled mom is the perfect Karen preset with a blonde haircut and the look that says screw you all. Entitled mom looks at the people waiting patiently in line along the hill, grabs her child's hand, and trots up to the top of the hill, cutting in front of a bunch of people. People don't really do anything except give her dirty looks. I just decided to ignore it and began to push my cousin to start sledding. He slides down, laughing and yelling excitedly. Afterwards, we move to the side of the hill so we don't get hit and drink some hot cocoa to take a break. The entitled mother pushes her kid down on his sled. The kid then leans toward the side in the middle of riding and tries to hit people who are walking across the hill to move. They all carefully walk out of the way and nothing bad happens. After about this kid's 4th run, he begins to aim for my cousin. I pull my cousin out of the way just in time before the entitled kid hits him. When the entitled mother tries to get her kid and take him back up the hill, I try to confront the entitled mother. Me. Hey ma'am, can you please watch your kid? She gives me a dirty look. Go away, witch. I go back to my cousin and let him watch my phone while he drinks his cocoa. He sees from the top of the hill the entitled mother saying something to the kid, then pushes the kid's sled really hard. The kid then changes his course towards me and my little cousin. This time, I was fast and moved my cousin, then pushed the entitled kid away, causing him to flip over and wipe out. The kid then cries really loud even though he just fell over and got his head bonked by a sled. The entitled mother storms down the hill and begins screaming at me. You witch! You could have just killed my son, you worthless brat. Me. You were trying to kill my cousin using your kid. She proceeds to call me many curse words that I don't feel like writing out. At this point, my cousin is shaking with tears rolling down his face, and I just decide to get up and leave. Get back here, I'm not done with you. I flip her off and pack my cousin into the car. Later that evening, I found out from some neighbors that that was not the first time she tried to pull that nonsense. Neighbors told me that her and her kid get a pretty good kick out of it, and she deliberately tells her kid to try to hit them. Story 5. Background: my husband, our children who are now young adults, and I went no contact with my husband's entire immediate family and most extended relatives in 2016. That means it's been over 9 years without speaking to, contacting, or having any type of relationship or interaction with them. We gave them over 2 decades of chances, boundaries, and consequences. This was by no means a rash or selfish decision, but one made after thoughtful consideration and experience. Throughout the years, they still send us letters through the postal service, since they're blocked everywhere else. These letters typically contain requests for gifts. They enjoy creating registries similar to bridal or baby showers filled with outrageously priced items for occasions, such as birthdays, Christmas, graduations, anniversaries, and even trivial moments like, "Where I sneezed, therefore I deserve an expensive gift." Now on to what happened last week and today. I called my husband's aunt to catch up, as she's the only one we still keep in contact with. She gave me a heads up that my in-laws were pressuring her to contribute. They called it a donation over $100,000, not a typo, for their granddaughter's dorm fees. Their justification was, "We're family, and we need to stick together and do our part." This request was made to a woman who lives modestly and relies on Social Security. She rightly declined. They then sent her an invitation via text to the so-called dorm shower. She told me it was beyond ridiculous, especially since it followed their request for straight-up cash for the graduation. Meanwhile, I'm receiving texts and phone calls from old acquaintances and childhood friends. We all grew up in the same town, where my in-laws still live, though we've since moved about 4 hours away. These messages let us know that my in-laws have been contacting and bothering them, trying to acquire our new contact information since we changed our cell numbers and blocked them through every digital means possible. Then, last week, we received an actual printed invitation in the mail. Included with it was registry information, not from just one store, but from 3 different retailers. We were curious, so the entire family had a look and found it both comical and appalling. The least expensive item on the registry was a set of washcloths priced at around $60, followed by a power strip that cost $120. The prices only went up from there, with some items reaching into the $2,000 range. They even included commercial-grade appliances that are not even allowed in dorm rooms, so it made no sense for them to be on the list. Shortly after that, the phone calls began rolling in. All were from unfamiliar numbers and sent straight to voicemail. My husband's mother eventually left a message saying, "Husband's name, this is your mom. Niece's name is going away to college, and we need you to contribute $100,000 for her dorm. We also sent you an invitation to her dorm shower and a picture from her graduation." She added that there was a request for straight-up money, even though no party had been hosted. She ended with, "Don't disappoint us. You owe it to your niece and sister." First of all, an emphatic and polite no. Secondly, the niece's parents make more than $500,000 a year. They both work for the state, love to brag about it, and their salaries are public records, which we verified through the aunt. So shouldn't they be more than capable of affording their child's dorm necessities? Third, my husband and I have 2 children in university. One is going into their sophomore year, and the other into their junior year. We never made any grand announcements, let alone asked anyone for money. Our children even chose to stay local to help save costs. Fourth, why are they contacting my elderly parents and relatives trying to extract money and gifts from them? Isn't it against the law to attempt to exploit senior citizens? My husband promptly shredded all the mail, and I deleted the voicemail, reaffirming our decision to stay no contact. In the past 2 hours, I've received 6 more calls from unknown numbers with area codes from their region. None of them left a message. It's so exhausting. Just when you think you're free, they try to drag you back into their nonsense. It's upsetting, and the audacity is unreal. They didn't even bother asking about their biological grandchildren, who they claim to love with all their hearts. Edit. I realize I wasn't very clear, so to clarify, There were two separate requests. A demand for $100,000 for dorm fees and boarding, essentially rent and food. A dorm shower registry, where people were expected to purchase expensive gifts from a list chosen by the graduate. Edit 2. How did my husband's mother get our number? We're not sure. A friend mentioned that they shared our address, though they already had it. Our friends and my family still live in our hometown, where both my husband and I grew up. Many people, including our in-laws, attend the same church weekly, which is likely how they acquired our new number. We had only given our new numbers to trusted friends and family. Somehow, my husband's mother managed to get it, but no one has admitted to sharing it. Now, I'm getting a flood of calls from unknown numbers that don't leave voicemails. The timing aligns with the call and message from my husband's mother, so we believe the calls may be related. Thank you to everyone who took the time to read this rather lengthy post, offered advice, provided laughter, and suggested using Google Voice. It's already been implemented. No new voicemails as of now. I'll update if anything further happens. Update. We are maintaining no contact, meaning no gifts or donations of $100,000, because what they ultimately want is a reaction or any form of contact. We refuse to argue, and we refuse to give in. Therefore, we simply ignore. Our silence sends a very clear message that they hold no value in our lives, and that reality drives them absolutely up the wall. We've set up a separate Google Voice number, and everything else is being blocked on the landline. If callers don't leave a message or aren't part of our contact list, they're automatically ignored. My mother-in-law has left a single message at this point, but we've received at least 50 calls last time. I counted from numbers we don't recognize. We strongly suspect those are from people acting on behalf of my mother-in-law. I still don't understand why they're asking for $100,000 for dorm rent and food, because no matter how I calculate it, the math simply doesn't make sense. I spoke to my cousin, who is a lawyer though not practicing in my area, and gave her all the information. I asked if anything could be done. She reached out to a retired colleague who used to practice and now teaches, and they basically advised me to continue ignoring the situation because, legally, not much can be done. It's frustrating, but it is what it is. Now on to the gossip. My dad and uncles have been part of the church board for decades. Every Monday, the board, secretary, and clergy gather to review the week ahead, deal with any issues, and approve or reject whatever needs addressing. It's all pretty standard procedure. My in-laws attend the church, but they aren't really involved when it comes to committees, fundraising, or planning activities. My mother-in-law has volunteered exactly once at a bake sale over the course of 40-plus years of living in the community and attending this church. The church has a large banquet room that includes a stage, bar area, and fountain. It's used for church functions, plays, bazaars, dinner dances, and private parties, and it can be rented out for a fee. Everyone pays some sort of fee. There's a clear breakdown of all costs involved. There are two pricing structures, one for stewards members who pay an annual fee to the church, and one for non-stewards, non-members, or anyone else wishing to rent the space. If you're a steward, then you get the rental at cost, meaning the church doesn't make any extra money. If you're not a member, there's an added charge for using the space. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law want to rent the banquet room because they're expecting over 200 guests for a dormitory shower. They submitted an online request that required their information: steward number, purpose of the party, number of guests, list of vendors, whether there will be liquor, and any special requests. The church board reviews every request, and if they have questions, they follow up with a phone call. The secretary had my mother-in-law on speakerphone so everyone could listen and ask questions if needed. They are not current stewards. The last time they were stewards was when their children were little. No judgment, just explaining the facts. They used their decades-old steward number and pretended not to understand when the secretary said they must be current members to qualify for the discounted rate. They already know this because they tried to pull the same trick for my sister-in-law's large bridal shower. She had a total of 5 as well as during the christenings of her children. The church is required to obtain several permits depending on the type of event: insurance, security, liquor permits, custodians, and more, some of which I'm probably forgetting. There's also a pre-approved list of vendors you must choose from if you plan to serve food or liquor. These vendors set their own prices separate from the church. If you want to rent the space, those are the rules, and they've been in place for over 30 years. If you follow the rules, the process is pretty seamless. I've used the space many times over the years without any issues. My mother-in-law then tried to negotiate the price, saying they had volunteered so much over the years. Then she tried to claim they were going to bring in their own food and liquor. The church made it very clear, you must use vendors from the pre-approved list, or you cannot serve food or beverages at all. There are no exceptions to this rule. At that point, my mother-in-law shifted tactics and said she wanted to charge an entrance fee and have a cash bar, most likely so she could use the space and, knowing her, increase prices to make a profit. The church explained that charging an entrance fee and operating a cash bar would require additional permits, paperwork, and fees. She didn't like that answer and abruptly said, "Just forget it." In the special requests section of the application, she also asked if the church choir could donate a performance. On top of that, she wanted to organize some kind of parade at the end of the event. My dad said that everyone sitting around the board table was just shaking their heads in disbelief at the absurdity of the whole thing. What makes this even more bizarre is that the party is supposedly happening the first week of August. The original invitation listed my sister-in-law's home address as the venue. So, over 200 people are expected to attend a party in a residential neighborhood with very limited parking for a dormitory shower. I'm sure the whole event will be every bit as classy as they are. Story 6. So, I 21-year-old male have been friends with my best friend 21-year-old female for 8 years. We initially bonded over having similarly chaotic home situations with our parents, so our relationship is almost like that of siblings. However, recently, I've been noticing some patterns that I'm no longer willing to tolerate. For starters, we've never been on the same page about finances. I've always been independent, paying for my own college, clothes, bills, car, everything. I've been working since I was 14. Meanwhile, she's always had occasional financial support from her aunt. Nothing substantial or life-changing. Her parents aren't dependable or present in her life, and I empathize with her for that because it's the same situation for me. She has a summer job as a camp counselor for kids and wants to be a teacher, but it's not full-time. She's also been putting off getting her driver's license for years and doesn't have a car. So, anytime we want to hang out or go somewhere, I'm always the one driving and often going out of my way to include her, which, up until recently, I was happy to do. Years ago, I started noticing that when I complained about my job, she never understood what was fair or unfair in a workplace, or how exhausting it is to work a full week. Eventually, I stopped venting to her about work altogether. This is translated into our relationship today as a lack of understanding about the value of hard-earned money. For example, I feel like I'm always expected to pay when we go to the beach, to cover most of the groceries when we go on trips, and to be the designated driver. Recently, when we went out to eat, I put my card down for the entire bill. Days later, I realized she hadn't paid me back. When I asked her about it, she replied with "eventually" and sent me a picture of her empty bank account. I texted her asking if she could at least let me know in advance when she wouldn't be able to pay me back, especially since we're both broke college students. The very next day, I blew a tire on my car and immediately looked to the people who owed me money for help, but she never even acknowledged my message. Granted, none of us should have been eating out, and I learned that lesson the hard way. But it really bothered me that she didn't even say thank you or apologize for not paying me back. Additionally, I had been helping her practice for her driving test. After months of pushing her to schedule it, she finally did on the second day of my first full-time job after graduation. I allowed her to use my car for the test because she didn't have anyone else to help her. We were practicing, and she was going away the weekend before the test. We were both free on Monday, which was the day before my first day of work. She asked to practice then, and I told her I wanted that day for myself because I was about to start working full-time. She responded, "So what, I'm just not going to practice." I told her it wasn't my responsibility, that she felt unprepared. We ended up practicing that day anyway because, truthfully, I'm a bit of a pushover. But it bothered me that she dismissed my boundary and once again showed a lack of understanding about the demands of a real job. Another example was during a trip to her aunt's house for the 4th of July this year. We went to the grocery store, and when it came time to pay, I asked how we would split the cost. She grabbed only the items she personally wanted, and I ended up paying for the rest. I paid $1.70 while she paid only $1.20. I was furious. The next morning, we went out to get donuts for the group. There were 8 of us, and I paid for all the donuts $50 total, and she didn't even offer to chip in. Long story short, moments like these have become more common. Recently, she was sick, so I made her homemade chicken soup with broth that I prepared from scratch. I enjoy cooking, and I delivered it to her house. She thanked me, but the next day she texted me saying she wished it had more broth. I was stunned. Like, seriously. I've always been transparent with her when I'm struggling financially, and I know she doesn't have much either. But I'm getting less willing to go out of my way when I don't feel appreciated or even acknowledged. I also feel that she's old enough to start taking charge of her life and become less reliant on me. I recognize that she has a harder life than most, but so do I. There are times when she'll give me gas money or pay for dinner for the group, but those moments are very rare, and I still feel the friendship is quite unbalanced. There are good moments in our friendship, even though all of this might make it sound completely one-sided. She has been there for me in emotional ways when no one else was. She's understood things about my life that most people wouldn't take the time to understand. I genuinely care about her, and that's what makes this all so difficult. But I'm starting to feel drained. I've been carrying a lot of the weight in this friendship, and it's becoming harder to ignore. I don't want to end our friendship, but I also don't want to continue feeling used or taken for granted. I'm now at the point where I'm seriously questioning what to do next. How do I set boundaries without completely damaging what we have? Is she being entitled, or is this just a lack of awareness on her part? Could this be something we work through if I bring it up clearly and respectfully? I worry that she'll take it personally, or worse, that she won't see an issue with any of it. I've already tried giving hints like saying I'm broke, or I'd prefer to stay in rather than go out, but the hints don't seem to land. She'll still suggest things that cost money or require me to drive, as if those factors don't matter. I think what I really need is for her to acknowledge the imbalance, even if she can't fix it overnight. I need her to recognize that, while I care deeply about her and want to be there for her, I'm a person with limits too. I want to feel like my efforts are appreciated, not just expected. It doesn't always have to be about money. A thank you here and there, some effort to drive or plan things that don't cost as much, or even just offering to split things fairly, those little gestures would mean a lot. Ultimately, I still believe in the value of our friendship. But if it's going to last, something needs to change. I can't keep putting in more than I get back and feeling invisible in the process. I want to support her, but not at the cost of my own mental or financial well-being. So, for anyone who's been through something similar, how do you approach setting boundaries in a way that doesn't come off as an attack? How do you communicate to someone that, even though you love them, you need more balance and mutual respect in the friendship? I'm open to advice because I really don't want to lose her, but I also don't want to keep losing parts of myself just to keep the peace.